Skywalker's character more. Even, sort of the wooden, if you will, not spectacular performance of Hayden Christensen. And I don't think that's all on him. I think that has a lot to do with the writing and a lot to do with the directing from George Lucas. But when I get into this idea that Anakin didn't have a dad, he didn't have a daddy, it really adds a deeper layer and an even more, and it brings even more tragedy to his story and what happens. So let me, using this poster, let me share with you just something really brief that brought me to where this landed. I had a circumstance this past weekend with my oldest son. He's 13 years old. He ended up in a situation where he essentially was being bullied, and I wasn't there to help him. And he's fine. It was in my view, being a dad, it was a horrible situation that it absolutely breaks my heart to not have been able to be there to have helped him or to stop to what was taking place. And I don't mean to make it sound worse than what it was, but again, for a 13-year-old good kid, it had to be pretty scary what he had to deal with a group of individuals that were harassing him and his friend for a fairly long length of time. Thankfully, there's been some remedy to it. We've been able to find out the individuals involved in this, and we're rectifying the situation. But I've never felt as a father so helpless in not being able to help my son in that situation, and not knowing that was happening. I'm just sitting at home watching TV on a Friday night, and something else is happening to my son, and I have no idea, and I find out about it, after the fact. And this set me down a path of the importance of fathers, the importance of being able to have that relationship. That's not to say that children can't be raised by a mom and be raised well by a single parent, either a mom or a dad. I'm not saying that at all. I am of the opinion, I'm be completely honest, I am of the opinion that the best circumstance for a child to have the best opportunity they can have is with a strong family unit of a mom and a dad. That's just my opinion. And fathers are so important to raising children. When I began to think about how do I handle this with my son, I now have an opportunity here, and I need to be there for him, help him teach the lessons. A part of the situation that he dealt with was some things that he did that kind of brought this about that weren't that bad, but maybe if he hadn't done some things, he wouldn't have been put in the situation that he was in. Doesn't make it deserving of what happened, but he wasn't innocent completely in this whole situation. But also being there and helping him dealing with any types of emotions involved in that. I was very close to, and I still am, with my father. But my parents were divorced when I was at a really young age. I think 11 years old, I think. I'm kind of blocked the whole thing out. But, and I went to go live with my dad after my parents got divorced. And we've had our share of rocky times throughout, my adolescence and growing up, and him marrying my stepmom now. And again, our relationship's great, but I'm a byproduct of divorce, and I'm very thankful that I had my dad there. And I began to think about Star Wars. I began to think about the fact that, wow, when you apply really this idea that Anakin was conceived by the Force and the midichlorians, which I know a lot of fans have a hard time with. When I begin to look at it from the standpoint of, I actually like the fact that George Lucas did that. It wasn't a daddy abandoned Anakin Skywalker. He never had a dad. So now you've got a whole other host of issues. It's one thing, like Luke, to be looking for his dad, to know he had a dad there. Anakin never had one. So he never had that fatherly guidance until Qui-Gon Jinn shows up. And by that age, he's in the development stages. And I'm going really deep on this. But again, I like this idea because to me, it really enhances the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. So here he is, no dad, living with mom, who seems nice enough. And his first father figure that rolls up, essentially, is Qui-Gon Jinn. And he immediately gravitates towards Qui-Gon Jinn at the same time that he meets Padme, okay, and obviously feels the attraction that he has as being a little kid. And through the story, he ends up leaving his mom. So now he's left his mom, never had a dad father figure. Now he's there with Qui-Gon, with a girl that he's feeling emotions for. And then what happens? Well, Qui-Gon gets killed. So now technically the first dad that he ever had is dead before he even has a chance to really learn anything from him, apart from the midichlorians in The Phantom Menace. So now you have Obi-Wan Kenobi step in to end up, training Anakin Skywalker. Well, that's not going to work because Obi-Wan Kenobi isn't that far removed from age from Anakin, nor has he really had the proper training when you think about it. I mean, he was still learning from Qui-Gon Jinn at the time of his death. So now Anakin is being trained by a guy who hasn't fully been trained by the Jedi. And also, we don't know what Obi-Wan Kenobi's background was as it relates to fathers, but you don't have Anakin Skywalker in a position where suddenly now he's getting the best father figure because you have somebody that's training him to be a Jedi and he more of a mentor but less as a father figure. And what I like about this is that when you take this idea that all of this is swirling in the back of Anakin Skywalker, that his development into manhood is being drastically and negatively hindered by the fact that he doesn't have a strong reference to a father. He didn't have somebody there who could help him through the hard times as a male role model. He didn't have somebody like a John Justice to his son to deal with those issues where, he needed some guidance and needed somebody there to love him. Sure, he had his mom. Don't misunderstand. Moms are important. Moms provide a crucial role in any child's development. Moms need to be there too. I'm not diminishing that. But there is something very unique about that relationship between fathers and sons. And so what happens? You get to Attack of the Clones, and now you got a circumstance where he comes back in contact with the girl that he met originally at the time when he was first introduced to the man who should have been his fatherly role model, but unfortunately was killed. And it's a girl that he's in love with in Padme. And of course, what happens? He gravitates towards her. Why wouldn't he? He needs something to cling to. He's been taken away from his mom, which is the only strong connection to family that Anakin has had, and so now he's going to seek out that connection in Padme, which he does throughout Attack of the Clones. For as wonky as that relationship is in the movie, it is developed in the film. For as silly as the dialogue gets of, I wish I could wish my feelings away, when you begin to apply, and who knows, I mean, I would assume that they had to be thinking about this when they wrote it. I would assume that George Lucas had this in mind, but it really makes a lot of sense that Anakin would be willing to risk it all for Padme because he's never had anybody. And so you are going to go and risk it all. This is what's most important to you. Somebody who will be there for you, somebody who you can protect, who you can love. And of course, by the time we get towards the end of the film, midway through, he actually gets back to his mom, and what happens? His mom dies. So now his mom's dead. He couldn't save her. He's got nobody anymore. And at the moment of crisis, Padme ends up returning that affection to him as they are, as they float into the arena on Geonosis. It's funny in the movie Serenity. I love that movie. based off the TV show Firefly. There's a moment there where the girl mechanic aboard Serenity, and I can't remember her name right now. Anyway, she's in love with a guy on this ship who is trying to protect his sister, who's the core of the film because she's been trained to be an assassin. So she's been in love, and she's been showing her affection for this guy throughout the whole movie, but it's unrequited love. She kind of keeps putting the vibes out there, but he's not kicking him back. He's not really giving her what she's looking for. And at the end of the movie, towards the end of the movie, they're in this in the middle of this battle, and with it looking like all hope is lost, he finally confesses how his feelings for her. To which case she says, the heck with this, I'm gonna live. It's one of the funnier moments in the whole film. But it reminded me of the scene in Attack of the Clones when they are heading into the Geonosian arena, and Padme says, "I truly, deeply love you. And before we die, I wanted you to know." I just get this sort of mental image of Anakin thinking to himself, "Well, the heck with this, I want to live." But you think about the timing of that, and now he finally has what he wants in Padme. After all of these failures, after all of this death that he's had to experience, and not having a father to help him guide the way. I mean, look at the original trilogy and Luke Skywalker. You can apply a lot of these same issues to Luke. Luke knew he had a dad. That's what I was drawn to when I first saw the movie, just being a little kid at 5, 6, 7 years old, thinking to myself how hard it must have been for Luke to not know who his daddy was and how he just wants to go and meet his daddy, and then how painful it must have been to find out that it's the worst murderer in the galaxy, being Darth Vader. But even then, Luke ended up, similar to Anakin Skywalker, having a mentor or a father figure, not being Uncle Owen, but being Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, Obi-Wan Kenobi was able to stick with him and guide him along the way as Force Ghost Obi-Wan Kenobi. But, the parallels are pretty blatant. I don't need to spell it out for you. You've seen the movies. So this brings me to Revenge of the Sith. And that's why I think Revenge of the Sith works. You had people complain about Attack of the Clones and the love story there. But it pays off in Revenge of the Sith. And again, it's almost like my argument that you can't get to The Force Awakens without having the prequels. The prequels enriched the galaxy and expanded it so much, and did so much more to expand the galaxy, that it afforded J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan and Kathleen Kennedy and Disney and Lucasfilm to go backwards and really make The Force Awakens sort of a minimalist movie, just in terms of scale and scope. It's not a dig, don't misunderstand, but you put The Force Awakens side by side with any of the prequel movies, and certainly Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and The Force Awakens is a much smaller film, just like A New Hope was, okay? But be that as it may, I don't think you can get to Revenge of the Sith, which is arguably the one that most people cite as their favorite prequel movie, and individuals that don't even like the prequels, for the most part, give thumbs up to Revenge of the Sith. I think that's largely due to the part that it was a fairly dark movie, and George Lucas really stripped out a lot of the little silly stuff. Just as a quick side note, in Attack of the Clones, you take away, they already diminished Jar Jar Binks' role in Attack of the Clones, but they added in some goofy humor. Some of the stuff between C-3PO and R2-D2 just kind of went a little bit too far. I've lost my head when they're in the droid factory, and oh, I'm quite beside myself. Oh, this is such a drag. Those lines just fell really flat. That's not to say there weren't silly jokes in the original trilogy, but they were subtle, or at least subtler than they were in the prequel trilogy. Revenge of the Sith really got rid of all that. But also, you really did feel, at least in my opinion, for what was happening to Anakin. And I bought hook, line, and sinker why he would go and allow himself to become a Sith to save Padme. And again, don't misunderstand. I'm not doing this podcast saying that I've discovered something amazing. That was obviously what the whole point was. that Anakin had so much loss throughout his life that he lost his mom. He couldn't save his mom, so he was going to save